They had only been married for a few hours when it all came crashing down. A wedding in Miami should have been the start of forever, vows whispered beneath swaying palms, a honeymoon suite high above the ocean, and a bride still glowing from the night's celebrations. But by sunrise, the dream had turned into a crime scene. The bride was gone, her new husband trembling in the hotel lobby, muttering words that chilled investigators. "She lied to me. Everything was a lie." What could drive a man, freshly wed, to such despair before the ink on his marriage license had even dried? What secrets could a woman carry so heavily that they threatened to shatter her perfect wedding night? This story isn't just about love and betrayal. It's about how a hidden past, no matter how carefully buried, can resurface in the most brutal way. Have you ever thought you truly knew someone, only to later question if you ever did? Do you believe the past should be forgiven and forgotten, or do you think it always comes back? These are the questions that linger when we look at the case of Lucas Moreno and Isabella Reyes. To their families and friends, they were the perfect match. But one envelope slipped under a hotel door changed everything. Stay with us, because over the next few minutes, we're not just telling a tragic crime story. We're peeling back the layers of choices, lies, and moments of rage that ended in the death of a young bride on what should have been the happiest night of her life. By the end, you'll be left asking yourself, was Isabella's past the real danger, or was it the man who promised to protect her forever? Before we get deeper into this case, take a second to support the channel. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment below. Do you think secrets can ever truly stay hidden in a marriage? Your thoughts might just shape our next discussion. When people first met Isabella Reyes, they rarely forgot her. At 28, she carried herself with a confidence that seemed older than her years. Her laugh had a way of filling a room, and her eyes hinted at a depth of experience she rarely spoke about. She had built a promising life in Miami as a real estate agent, but her story had started thousands of miles away in Medellin, Colombia. Isabella's early life was marked by loss. Her father died suddenly when she was only 6, leaving her mother to raise 3 children on her own. In a city still scarred by cartel violence, opportunities for young women were few, and survival often meant making choices that blurred the line between survival and risk. By her late teens, Isabella had slipped into circles that connected nightlife with organized crime. Acquaintances from her neighborhood whispered about her time as a nightclub hostess. Some claimed she had been romantically involved with a mid-level cartel associate, others suggested she used relationships strategically, saving money to one day leave Colombia. What mattered most was that by 2008 she had made it to Miami, determined to start fresh. She enrolled in English classes, later earned her real estate license, and began building a career. But even as she reinvented herself, echoes of her past followed her like faint shadows. Old acquaintances drifted through Miami, debts lingered, and rumors never quite faded. Lucas Moreno, on the other hand, was raised in an entirely different world. Born to Cuban-American parents in Coral Gables, his childhood was structured around faith, family, and discipline. His father, a high school teacher, and his mother, a nurse, instilled in him the importance of education and responsibility. Lucas lived by routine. He was the type of man who kept receipts in neat envelopes, showed up early to meetings, and rarely took unnecessary risks. By his late 20s, Lucas had carved out a stable career as a financial analyst. Friends described him as disciplined to the point of rigidity, someone who thrived on order. But they also admitted he was lonely. While others in his circle had married or started families, Lucas spent most evenings working late or eating dinner with his parents. He longed for companionship, but he struggled with vulnerability. That began to change in 2009 when he met Isabella at a charity gala in Coral Gables. She was volunteering as part of a real estate networking event, and Lucas was attending with colleagues. Their connection was immediate. Isabella admired his steadiness, a quality she had rarely found in men before, while Lucas was drawn to her warmth and magnetic presence. Their relationship progressed quickly. Within a year, Lucas introduced her to his parents, who were charmed by her easy conversation and poise. Friends teased Lucas, saying Isabella had brought him out of his shell. She, in turn, seemed eager to embrace his world, family dinners on Sundays, quiet evenings rather than late-night outings, and vacations planned months in advance. Still, there were subtle cracks. Isabella avoided questions about her past in Colombia, brushing them off with vague answers. When old acquaintances occasionally resurfaced in Miami, she seemed anxious, often insisting they leave restaurants or clubs early. Lucas noticed these moments but chalked them up to bad memories she'd rather forget. He chose to see her ambition and resilience rather than the pieces of her life she left unspoken. By late 2010, Lucas proposed. For Isabella, it was the culmination of her reinvention, proof that she had stepped into a respectable, stable future. For Lucas, it was a long-awaited chance at companionship. They began planning a wedding that reflected both of their dreams, tasteful, elegant, and unforgettable. The months leading up to the ceremony were filled with excitement, but also quiet tension. Isabella's family from Colombia would not be attending, citing travel and financial challenges. She told Lucas it didn't matter, that her life was now in Miami. Lucas's family, on the other hand, threw themselves into preparations, eager to welcome her. In private, though, Isabella seemed restless. She took extra care with her appearance, changed her phone number twice, and once returned home shaken after spotting someone she claimed was an old friend. Lucas reassured her, never pressing for details. His trust was absolute, and perhaps, dangerously blind. The wedding itself, held in April 2011, was flawless on the surface. Guests later recalled how radiant Isabella looked in her lace-sleeved gown, how Lucas couldn't stop smiling as they exchanged vows. The reception was a swirl of salsa music, champagne, and joy. Yet one detail would later haunt those who were there, a stranger at the bar. No one recognized him, but his sharp suit and watchful demeanor set him apart from the other guests. He stayed only briefly, leaving without speaking to anyone. At the time, most thought nothing of it. But in hindsight, that fleeting presence felt like the faintest tremor before an earthquake. For Lucas and Isabella, the night ended with cheers, sparklers, and the promise of a future together. But beneath the sparkle of champagne flutes and the rhythm of the dance floor, the weight of old secrets pressed closer. Within hours, their marriage would no longer be a symbol of hope, but the beginning of a tragedy that would shake Miami. The reception ended a little after midnight. Guests trickled out of the ballroom, still humming along to the salsa band's final number. Lucas and Isabella, beaming, retreated to their honeymoon suite on the 12th floor. Hotel cameras showed them entering together, hand in hand. For everyone who had watched them exchange vows just hours earlier, it was the perfect ending to a perfect day. Sometime between 2 o'clock and 4 a.m., the fairy tale collapsed. Neighbors in adjoining rooms later reported faint disturbances, muffled voices, a crash, and what sounded like a woman sobbing. One guest recalled hearing a man's raised voice, sharp and angry, though the words were indistinguishable. No one called security. In a hotel known for lavish parties, late-night noise wasn't unusual. By dawn, however, the atmosphere shifted. At 6 a.m., a hotel staff member noticed Lucas sitting in the lobby. His tie was gone, his shirt wrinkled, his skin pale. He looked like a man who hadn't slept. When approached, he muttered almost mechanically, "She lied to me." Everything was a lie. Concerned but uncertain what he meant, the staff alerted security. Minutes later, housekeeping staff entered the honeymoon suite to prepare for breakfast service. The room told a very different story than the smiling photos from the night before. Furniture was askew, a glass lay shattered on the carpet, and Isabella was motionless on the bed. A pillow rested near her head, and marks along her neck immediately raised alarms. Hotel security contacted Miami Beach police. Within 20 minutes, officers arrived and secured the scene. Detectives noted signs of a struggle, overturned chairs, displaced bedding, and bruising consistent with force around Isabella's throat. There was no evidence of forced entry. Whoever had been with her that night had entered with her willingly. Lucas was taken into custody for questioning. Initially, he claimed he had found Isabella unresponsive when he woke up, insisting she must have collapsed during the night. But his demeanor, dazed, trembling, and at times incoherent, did little to ease suspicion. During the preliminary investigation, officers discovered something that shifted the tone entirely. In the pocket of Lucas's discarded suit jacket was an envelope. Inside were photographs of Isabella from years earlier in Medellin. The grainy images showed her in the company of men later identified as cartel affiliates. One photo captured her at a party where stacks of cash and weapons were visible in the background. Alongside the photographs was a note written in block letters. "You don't know who she really is. She belongs to us." This discovery complicated everything. The police now faced two possibilities: either Lucas had killed his wife in a fit of rage after learning about her past, or someone else, perhaps connected to those images, had been involved. Witness interviews began almost immediately. Guests who had noticed the unidentified man at the reception provided descriptions to sketch artists. The man's sudden appearance and quick exit raised suspicions that he could have delivered the envelope. Unfortunately, surveillance footage from the ballroom bar area had been partially obstructed, leaving investigators with only a blurry outline. Forensic analysis of the suite strengthened the case against Lucas. The bruising on Isabella's neck indicated sustained pressure consistent with manual suffocation. Glass fragments and traces of her blood on the carpet suggested she had struggled. No foreign fingerprints were found, aside from the couple's. Police interrogated Lucas again later that morning. This time, under mounting evidence, his account began to shift. He admitted to confronting Isabella after finding the envelope. According to his statement, she broke down and confessed that she had once been close to dangerous men in Colombia but insisted she had severed ties years earlier. Lucas claimed that in that moment he felt betrayed, overwhelmed by the realization that the woman he had married had hidden such a past from him. He admitted that the confrontation escalated, that he had pushed her, and that he had lost control. His confession sent shockwaves through the community. The press quickly seized on the story. Headlines painted a dramatic picture: cartel bride murdered in Miami hotel, honeymoon horror in South Beach, and financial analyst snaps after wedding day revelation. For weeks, tabloids splashed photographs of Isabella in her wedding gown next to mugshots of Lucas, crafting a narrative of love, secrets, and sudden violence. Behind the media frenzy, investigators still pursued unanswered questions. Who had sent the envelope? Why choose their wedding night to expose Isabella's past? Detectives suspected the mysterious guest had delivered it, but no one could provide a name. Leads dried up quickly. If he had ties to organized crime, pursuing him was like chasing smoke. Friends of Isabella gave conflicting accounts during interviews. Some described her as ambitious and hardworking, eager to leave her past behind. Others admitted she had seemed guarded, sometimes nervous in public places, as though always looking over her shoulder. One acquaintance recalled her saying just months before the wedding, "Miami never forgets." Lucas's family, devastated, maintained that their son was a good man pushed past his limits. Isabella's relatives in Colombia, learning of her death through international news coverage, expressed outrage. They insisted she had left behind her troubled beginnings long ago and deserved a chance at happiness. As the investigation continued, detectives were left with a troubling reality: while Lucas's confession tied him to the act, the envelope remained a mystery. Was it meant to warn him, destroy the marriage, or provoke exactly what followed? The answer, like the identity of the stranger at the bar, slipped away into silence. Lucas Moreno's arrest came within hours of his confession. Police escorted him from the station to the county jail in handcuffs, his once polished wedding attire now stained and wrinkled. The booking photo, released later that day, spread across every news outlet in Miami, a young groom whose hollow eyes betrayed exhaustion and disbelief. For many, it was the first glimpse of a man who only hours earlier had been dancing with his bride. The Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office wasted little time. By the following week, Lucas was formally charged with second-degree murder. Prosecutors argued that his actions showed intent. Suffocation is not instantaneous. It requires minutes of sustained pressure, making it a deliberate act rather than a fleeting mistake. The charge carried the possibility of life in prison. At the initial court appearance, Lucas stood silently as the charges were read. His defense attorney, a well-known Miami litigator, entered a plea of not guilty. The attorney's strategy was clear from the outset: paint Lucas as a man consumed by shock, betrayal, and emotional distress. Not a cold-blooded killer, but a groom pushed past his breaking point by secrets hidden until the most vulnerable night of his life. The prosecution leaned heavily on the physical evidence. Crime scene photographs displayed bruising on Isabella's neck, disturbed bedding, and fragments of broken glass, details that told a story of violence. The medical examiner's testimony was unflinching: Isabella's death was the result of asphyxiation caused by manual force. No drugs, no medical conditions. Someone had pressed until she could no longer breathe. But the defense countered with its own narrative. They highlighted the envelope of photographs and the anonymous note, describing them as a cruel act of sabotage. They argued that Lucas had been targeted, blindsided on his wedding night with revelations about his wife's past that no one could reasonably process. According to this argument, Lucas did not act with cold intent but suffered a temporary breakdown brought on by emotional shock. The courtroom became a theater. Prosecutors portrayed Lucas as a man unwilling to accept the truth, who chose violence rather than honesty. Defense attorneys framed him as a tragic figure, a man whose trust was shattered in an instant. Each side summoned witnesses who painted conflicting portraits of Isabella. To some, she was a woman who had fought hard to leave behind dangerous connections; to others, her past still loomed like an unclosed chapter. The media amplified every detail. Tabloids branded Isabella the cartel bride, while talk shows debated whether Lucas was a calculating murderer or a victim of manipulation. Television crews camped outside the courthouse, capturing every appearance of grieving relatives. Lucas's parents, visibly shaken, insisted their son was a man of integrity caught in extraordinary circumstances. Isabella's relatives in Colombia, speaking through local reporters, rejected any suggestion that she remained tied to criminal circles. They called her death not only tragic but unjust. The trial preparations were riddled with complications. Defense attorneys demanded the prosecution prove that Lucas had not been provoked into a temporary state of madness. Prosecutors countered by emphasizing choice: Lucas could have walked away, sought annulment, or confronted the accusations later. Instead, he chose a violent path that ended in death. Speculation swirled about the mysterious guest spotted at the wedding reception. Detectives admitted they could not identify him. The defense seized on this gap, suggesting the envelope had been part of a broader scheme to destabilize Isabella's marriage, perhaps by someone still tied to her past. Some even floated the possibility that Isabella had been targeted, and that Lucas had reacted out of fear rather than pure rage. But without concrete evidence, the theory remained speculation. False leads complicated matters further. At one point, police investigated a man in Miami with known cartel ties who matched the description of the unidentified wedding guest. After weeks of surveillance, no connection to the case could be established. Another rumor suggested Isabella owed debts that had resurfaced, but financial records showed nothing suspicious. Each time, hope for an alternative explanation collapsed, tightening the focus back on Lucas. During pre-trial hearings, the judge ruled that the envelope and its contents could be presented to the jury but emphasized they did not excuse the killing. Instead, they were to be viewed as context. Evidence of what Lucas learned that night, but not justification for his actions. This ruling was a major blow to the defense, narrowing their ability to claim complete exoneration through provocation. By the time the trial date was set in 2012, the case had captured national attention. News networks outside Florida ran features on the honeymoon tragedy. Legal analysts debated whether the jury would view Lucas with sympathy or disdain. For Miami residents, the trial became more than a legal proceeding; it was a morality play about love, deception, and violence. Through it all, one truth remained clear: both families were left devastated. Isabella's mother, speaking through tears to reporters in Medellin, described her daughter as a fighter who wanted a better life. Lucas's father stood outside the courthouse one morning and whispered, "This is not the son I raised." The trial promised answers, but it also deepened divides. Could betrayal explain violence? Could love and rage coexist in the same act? Or was Lucas simply a man who made an irreversible choice when confronted with truths he didn't want to face? As the jury was impaneled and the first witnesses prepared to testify, the stage was set for a courtroom drama that would expose not just evidence, but the raw human emotions at the heart of the tragedy. The trial of Lucas Moreno opened in the spring of 2012 in a packed Miami courtroom. Every seat was filled, from legal observers to journalists to curious locals drawn by the case's notoriety. Court officers even had to turn away people at the door. For weeks, headlines had promised explosive revelations, and when the proceedings finally began, the atmosphere buzzed with expectation. The prosecution wasted no time laying out their case. In their opening statement, they told the jury, this was not an accident. This was a deliberate act of violence. A young woman entered her honeymoon suite alive and full of hope. Hours later, she was dead. And the man who promised to protect her is the man who took her life. They displayed crime scene photographs, careful to balance clarity with respect. The images of bruising on Isabella's neck and the disarray of the room underscored their argument that this was a prolonged struggle. The medical examiner testified that suffocation takes several minutes, long enough for someone to realize what they're doing. The implication was unavoidable. Lucas had time to stop but didn't. The defense countered with their own narrative. They told the jury that Lucas had been blindsided by the envelope, evidence of a hidden past he could not have imagined. Their strategy rested on portraying him as overwhelmed, momentarily unhinged, a man pushed into an emotional corner. He was not a monster, the defense attorney argued. He was a groom deceived on the most vulnerable night of his life. Witness testimony quickly became the core of the trial. Hotel staff recalled Lucas sitting in the lobby at dawn, trembling, repeating, "She lied to me." Guests from neighboring rooms testified about the sounds they heard, raised voices, glass breaking, muffled crying. None of them had thought to call security, a detail that weighed heavily when prosecutors emphasized how long the ordeal may have lasted. Perhaps the most gripping testimony came from a close friend of Isabella's who had flown in from Colombia. She described Isabella's determination to leave her past behind, insisting that whatever associations she once had, they no longer defined her. Through tears, she told the jury, she wanted a new life. She wanted love. That's all. The defense pressed hard on the envelope. They entered it into evidence and suggested that the mysterious photographs and threatening note were designed to destabilize the marriage. They argued that the appearance of the unidentified man at the wedding reception proved Isabella's past was still reaching into her present, that Lucas had reason to fear what lay ahead. But prosecutors reminded the jury that regardless of outside interference, Isabella had died at the hands of her husband, not a stranger. Tensions rose when forensic experts were cross-examined. The defense attempted to argue that Lucas had not intended to kill, that perhaps he had only tried to restrain her during a heated argument. The prosecution fired back that the nature of the injuries showed otherwise, sustained pressure on the neck, not a fleeting grip. Throughout the proceedings, Lucas sat quietly, occasionally wiping his eyes, occasionally staring blankly ahead. When the prosecution displayed his written statement, his admission that he had lost control and suffocated Isabella, the courtroom fell into a heavy silence. Even the defense could not deny the power of his own words. Outside the courthouse, public opinion was fiercely divided. Some sympathized with Lucas, describing him as a man overwhelmed by betrayal. Others saw the case as clear proof of domestic violence, a preventable tragedy if Lucas had chosen to walk away instead of resorting to force. Television analysts debated nightly, each framing the story in their own way, love gone wrong, cartel connections haunting Miami, or a cautionary tale of rage and secrecy. Closing arguments crystallized the divide. The prosecution urged the jury to focus on the act, not the emotions leading up to it. No matter what secrets were revealed that night, Isabella Reyes did not deserve to die. Marriage is not ownership. Shock is not justification for murder. The defense asked for compassion. They reminded jurors that Lucas had no criminal record, no history of violence, and had lived a life of discipline and responsibility. They asked the jury to consider whether he had acted out of premeditation or momentary madness. After days of testimony and hours of closing statements, the jury retreated to deliberate. For nearly 2 days, the courthouse waited in tense anticipation. Reporters filled the steps, families gathered in separate clusters, and the public speculated endlessly. When the jury finally returned, the room fell silent. The verdict: guilty of second-degree murder. Lucas bowed his head as the words were read. His mother wept openly in the gallery, his father held her close. Across the aisle, Isabella's relatives clasped hands tightly, some crying, some simply staring at the man who had once been their daughter's groom. The judge sentenced Lucas to 25 years in state prison. In his final remarks, he spoke directly to Lucas: "You had choices. You could have sought answers another way. Instead, you chose violence. And for that choice, you must be held accountable." Reactions were swift. Advocates for victims of domestic violence praised the sentence as justice served. Others argued it was too lenient, given the brutality of Isabella's death. Meanwhile, Lucas's family described the punishment as a tragedy that destroyed 2 families instead of 1. In the days following, media outlets replayed clips of the trial, dissecting every moment. Commentators debated the lingering mystery: who had delivered the envelope, and why? The absence of answers left an enduring shadow over the case, a reminder that not every thread had been tied. For those closest to the story, however, the verdict marked an end of sorts. Isabella's family carried her memory forward, speaking of her not as a cartel bride, but as a woman who had fought to start over. Lucas began serving his sentence, a groom turned convict, his wedding day remembered not for vows and joy, but for betrayal, rage, and irreversible loss. Thank you for watching this story of love, secrets, and tragedy. The case of Lucas and Isabella reminds us how quickly life can change when trust is broken and choices are made in anger. If you found this story compelling, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next episode. Sharing also helps others discover these stories, so feel free to pass it along. We'd also love to hear your perspective. Do you believe Lucas acted purely out of rage, or do you think the envelope and its contents played a bigger role in shaping what happened? Drop your thoughts below, we always read through your comments. And before you go, let us know in the comments section where in the world you're watching from. It's always incredible to see how far these stories reach. Until next time, stay safe.